So welcome back to the Just Money Festival. And without wasting too much time, I just want to say a word, and that is that it is my pleasure to welcome both Holly Walter Kerby and her Storyform Science colleague, Adam Steinberg, to this Just Money Festival and to the work of the Alliance. I know from 45 years of personal experience, that kind of dates me, I think, and Holly, but 45 years of personal experience with her, that Holly is, among other things, an educator of the highest caliber, a serious playwright, an academic author, and a wonderful friend and human. Holly's artistry and effectiveness as an educator has its roots in theater, which she used pedagogically to teach chemistry to community college students in Madison, Wisconsin, in ways that were engaging, understandable, and memorable for them. At the root of theater and of being human, no matter what culture Holly discerned, is storytelling. And this insight, derived from her decades of teaching and of analyzing and honing her craft, led Holly to found Storyform Science, which she and Adam are going to introduce us to in this hour. Our hope in inviting them to do this plenary session today is that we in the Alliance will be able to imagine applying Storyform Science in our work to reach, teach, and move people in our communities to understand the flaws in our existing money system and in how we can correct them through just money reform and transformation at both macro and meso levels, as Katrina just spoke of. So please join me, maybe with visual Zoom clapping, in welcoming Holly and Adam into our midst. Thank you for being with us, Holly and Adam, and for what you are about to teach us.
All right, thank you very much. Let me share my screen here. Let's see if this works.
Yeah, we see it.
All right, good. Let's see if it advances. Oh, yes, it does. Yay. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Lucille. And as you already know, I'm a chemist, a playwright, and an educator. My partner, Adam, is an artist and a visual scientist. And I'll be talking the first part of this, mostly about giving talks, but about story form design. And then I'll pass it off to Adam, and he'll talk about developing visuals, also using the story form design. So let's start off. That right there is you. And you want to communicate your content in various ways. And the most common ways are probably through a presentation, a talk, or maybe a poster and visual, or maybe a paper, article, or manuscript of some sort. Now, the sort of trap I fall into, is that I think a lot about myself, and I think about what it is that I want to say and talk about my content. And of course, the problem with that is it's backwards. What I really should be thinking about is not what I want to talk about, but the whole purpose of communication is not for me, but it's for my audience. And I imagine you have a variety of types of audience you want to communicate with, but just from chats that I've had with Lucille, I know that they probably involved collaborators, policymakers, funders, general public, possibly peers, but also certainly people within your organization and teams. And I also imagine that you have a number of goals, but I want to propose to you that of all those goals, there's one that's the most important, that's foundational. And that goal is getting your audience to actually understand what it is that you're talking about. Why do I think this is so important, and why am I going to put it in front of all other goals? Well, if you can get people to understand what you're talking about, it means that they will have a knowledge base. They'll be able to ground their thinking in fact instead of myth or some crazy thing someone told them. And that will positively influence their behavior. And without understanding, none of those things will take place. So, given that as our major goal, how do we typically design, let's say, talks? I'm going to talk about talks. How do we typically design our talks to get our audience to understand? Well, generally speaking, what we do is we think about our content in all its complex beauty and glory. And we know all of it's really, really important, and we love it all. And so we would really like to put it all into our talk. Now, this is going to be tricky because it might have taken us years to learn what we learned or do that research. And we only have like 5 to 50 minutes, right? But we have our ways, we have our strategies. We can make bullet points, we can have tables, we can have graphs and jam it all in. And then if we're running out of time, we can just talk really, really fast. Now, I'm sure that you have all listened to these talks. And so let me ask you, of all these talks that you've heard in your content area, how many of them do you think you really understood the content from start to finish? And when I ask other people this, they say somewhere between 5 and 15%, which means that if that's true, which means that, a lot of the time people are sitting in talks across the world, talks with great content, not really understanding them. Now, why is this the case? Why doesn't this approach, which we've so often used, why doesn't it work very well? Well, it would work. I think what we're always hoping would happen when we do this sort of thing is that the content of our talk will just go into people's brains, right? And then they'll have, then they'll just have it. But of course, that's not what happens. What really happens is as we talk, and we keep giving people these slides with information on it, they take in this information and they have to sort of examine it, and then they try to put it together with what they already know, and also fit it in with what we continue to say. And they're smart, they can do that for a while, but at some point it gets to just be too much. It goes too quickly, and when that happens, they start to get frustrated, they get overwhelmed, they feel lost, and they start thinking about what they're going to have for dinner. And when that's the case, your content doesn't really matter at all anymore. In fact, you don't even matter because they're not paying attention. To get an audience to pay attention, we have to get them to get an audience to understand, we have to get them to pay attention. We have to get them to engage with what we say. And we have to get them to process the information as we're giving it to them. And this is a process which is called learning, and it takes a lot of effort to do. So the question is there some way, is there a mode of communication that can actually help the audience do this difficult process, help the audience learn? And will it work for any audience at any discipline? And will it work for talks and visuals? And the answer to this is yes. This mode of communication is called story. Story has been used for millennia to communicate. And when researchers have looked at story versus normal exposition, they found that people find it more interesting, more engaging, and more memorable. Stories have been used forever to teach lessons. And my own research suggests that story promotes inquiry-based learning if it's used properly. So Storyform science is based on story. And in particular, the way we developed it is we based Storyform science on 5 design elements of story. Adam and I have used those 5 design elements in Storyform science in workshops and in classes to help the participants do 3-minute, what they're called naked talks, which of course has nothing to do with what you're wearing or what you imagine the audience to be wearing. It's just the fact that you don't use slides. Infographics or visuals, posters, 10-minute talks with slides. And I have worked with my colleague, Joan Jorgensen at the UW Veterinary Science Department we have a course that teaches students how to use this Storyform to write papers and grants. So what are these 5 design elements? 5 design elements of story are journey, main character guide, question, focus, and show, don't tell. Now, first of all, I'm going to talk about these elements of story in situ. I'm going to talk about them in the context of story. And then I'm going to show you how Adam and I take those and apply them to the design of talks, infographics, posters, and slides. But to talk about how these work in story, I need to pick a story to use as my example. So what I'll pick is a genre, the murder mystery. So I want to review with you, in case you've never seen one of these, how murder mysteries work. First of all, someone is discovered dead, and it's not from natural causes. And a detective or a principal investigator is called in. Their problem, of course, is that they have to identify the person who committed the murder, and they do this by conducting an investigation. In the course of this investigation, all sorts of things might turn up. But for example, maybe they identify a witness, or maybe they recover a weapon of some sort, or maybe they find a motive. But whatever it is, in the end, it all adds up, and the detective or the investigator is able to identify who committed that murder. And then in the end, that person gets their comeuppance. That's how a murder mystery works. Okay, so now that we remember this and we're thinking about it, let me go through the principles, and I'll show you how they work in story, and then I'll show you how we're going to apply them. Element 1, journey. Stories are journeys. They're revealed a bit at a time in a series of well-established steps. So in a murder mystery, here are the steps. And again, this is the case for almost all stories. We have the beginning that sort of introduces and sets up everything. And then the problem is introduced, and there's often an approach to the problem with the problem. And then there's a series of episodes where someone tries to solve that problem, and oftentimes there's pushback or obstacles. Then there's a climax, often there's a car chase or some really dramatic revelation, but in the end, the problem is solved in the climax. And really the story's over then, except we like closure. And so there's that last scene that lets us have closure, that shows us the ramifications of the whole story on the world. That's the journey. Element 2 in a story, main character guide. In a story, well, a journey, the journey of a story, I mean, a journey is not just a route or a path, right? A journey is something that someone goes on. So who goes on this journey in the story? It's the main character. And many times in a detective sort of procedural, the main character is the detective or the investigator, but not always. But the main character is the one that goes on the journey. Now, what about the audience? I mean, I know that I've read or I've watched murder mysteries where I felt a lot of anticipation or excitement or satisfaction while I was watching or reading. How does story do that? How does story make me feel like I'm in there? Well, here's the trick, and it has to do with the main character. Once the audience sees that main character and they're set up properly, the audience identifies with them and they follow in their footsteps. And while the main character takes their journey, the audience takes that journey with them, seeing what they see, experiencing what they experience, and often feeling what they feel. So the main character is not just someone who exists in the story, they're also someone who is the guide for the audience. And that has particular applications when we're designing a talk. Element 3, stories are built around a question. Questions are these amazing things. I mean, when you think about it, when someone asks a question, this sort of space opens up in our brain, a space of uncertainty, of not knowing, and that makes us, with it comes anticipation. It makes us want to know the answer and close down that uncertainty. And that is a powerful force that's used extremely well in story. The whole first part of the story sets up that question. And then the question will be right here in the murder mystery. And, you know, think for a moment, what is the main question in a murder mystery that we want to find out the answer for? It's who done it, which is honestly the oddest contraction I've ever heard, but okay, that's what they're called, whodunits. And then when is that question answered? Not right away, it's answered at the very end. And that means that the audience has to be there the whole time. They can't go home right away. They have to sit there and wait for the answer that they want. And they do more than sit there. They actually go ahead and with the detective, they process those clues and they try to fit them together and they actually predict the answer before it's even revealed to them. Element 4, focus. It always seems like a story has so much in it, but one of the secrets of story is that stories are really very focused. They're about one thing, specific content, concepts, or a process. And oftentimes that's called the meaning or the lesson or the moral of the story. Stories work because they're about only one thing. And last but not least, the element of story, show, don't tell. Do you ever notice that in a story, whether it's in a film or whether you're reading it, that you never just hear about things in language, you see them. Nobody ever just says in a murder mystery, oh, you know, we discovered some, we found a witness and this is what they said. Instead, we get to see the witness and we get to hear what they say. And nobody says, oh, we found a gun in the lake. Instead, you get to see this gun pulled up out of the lake, covered with seaweed dripping, right? And you don't hear like, oh, we saw a transfer of funds between this account and that. Oftentimes in stories, the money turns up, cash. You can see it in a suitcase. Like, why is that? Why do stories show you the images or describe them in very visual language? It's because in our brains, visual things, whether it's visual language or the actual image, is processed in a different place than normal exposition. And it's much quicker, and it makes us basically feel like we're there, like we see these things in our mind's eyes. This is called show, don't tell. Stories always use this to make you feel like you're really in the story. Now, here's a disclaimer or a clarification. A murder mystery is not the same thing as a murder investigation. A murder mystery is a story, just a story. A murder investigation is a conglomerate, a whole collection of actions and results and evidence and interviews and documents, files and files of documents. If somebody said, or if you said, I'd like to learn a little bit about how murder investigations go, and somebody said, well, I'll just show you everything, all the information in this murder investigation, you would not be happy, because that would be lengthy, ineffective, and tedious. On the other hand, stories are interesting. They get you to pay attention, they get you to engage, process, and understand. Murder investigations are real life. It's what really happens. It's, as best we can approximate it, reality. Murder mysteries are stories, but they are an amazing form of communication that really assist people in learning and actually experiencing something new. And I think that's incredibly ironic that it's story that makes you feel like you're really there, that can really change you versus the chaos of real life. So if you have a talk to give with technical content, you really don't want to just deluge people with all that information, even though it's very important and it's dear to you. Instead, what you'd really like to do is change it into something that has the form of a story. How are you going to do that? Well, that's where Storyform science comes in. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these 5 design elements of story, and I'm going to show you how they apply to designing a talk. But first, before I do that, I just want to introduce you to some of the materials we give people in workshops and classes to guide them through this process. And the first thing is that we give them a template, a storyboard template. We also give them a grid of rectangles with lines in it. We'll talk about that in a bit. And we also give them a feedback rubric. Okay, let's go through the principles. So element 1, journey. So you remember back to the murder mystery, I said it was a journey. It had various parts and pieces, well-established steps that almost every story has. Well, take a look at the template. Those pieces, those steps of the journey of a story are represented on the storyboard template. And all the person has to do really is fill them in, and they will have a journey. Main character guide. The main character guide comes down here in the lower corner of the template. And this is the person who the audience will identify with and then go on the journey with this main character. Now, who is the main character? Well, if you're the person who did the research or you're the person who gathered up all the information, it will be you. If somebody else did that or a group of people did that, it will be them. If you're just going to show how information, if you're not going to talk about how it came to be or how it came to be pulled together, if you're just going to talk about how it affects people, then you'll probably want to pick someone who would be affected by it. And that, that doesn't have to be an actual real person. It can be a type of person, a group of people, or some sort of composite. And we would signal that to the audience when we talked about this. Now, there's a lot of people who immediately bristle at this and said, I don't want anybody in my talk. It's not about people. Well, first of all, everything's about people at some point or another. We're the people that do the research, and we're the people that are affected by information. But also, it's really important to put yourself or someone else in the story, because that person will be the audience's guide through your content. And without a guide, they're much more likely to get lost and stop paying attention. All right, element 3, stories are built around a question. Here's where the question is up here in our template. the whole first part of the template on the journey sets up the question, and then it is answered in the very end, just like a story. Your audience then in your talk would have to wait and couldn't just check out. There would be a point to them listening. I mean, sometimes when I listen to long talks, I think, what's the point here? Here's the point, to find out the answer to the question. And they wouldn't just do that. They will also, when you give them information that will lead to the answer, they will process it with you, with the main character, to find out that answer. Here's where the inquiry-based learning comes in. Element 4, focus. One of the first things we do in the process of creating a talk using our method is that we have the participant identify the audience and then come up with one main thing they want the audience to learn. And then everything else can be organized around that one main thing, but there really can only be one main thing per talk. And last but not least, kind of my favorite, show, don't tell. How are we going to use show, don't tell in our template? Well, we're going to do it by using icons. That grid that I spoke about earlier with the little dotted lines and the solid lines, we have people cut them apart and then fold them and then stand them up. And we ask them not to write words on them, but to draw little icons on them. So this is not, this is an extract, as you might have imagined. And the extract came from a colony of bacteria. Why was someone extracting bacteria? Actually, why was Meyer Kozlov, whose talk this comes from? It was happening because Meyer was looking for a mosquito repellent. So he was looking for bacteria and made that extract. Now, I'm certain you're thinking right now, like, why would you do that? Seems like it's going to a lot of trouble to cut out these little pieces of paper and draw icons. Well, Adam and I have been doing this for a long time, and we have tried many, many methods. And we have found that this is the ideal method to get people to consider all of their complicated content, break it down into pieces, and then organize those pieces in a talk based on a story. These little icons, they're visual, so they're actually in the language of story. They're representative. They're simple, they're flexible, so they allow people to easily move them around to rearrange their talks. They're physical, they're playful, and playfulness is really important when you're trying to do something new. And when they're when our participants first give their drafts, they actually use them as little props and prompts, so they don't write things out. All right, 5 design elements of story. We went through them, but there are 2 more things that I need to cover before I pass it over to Adam. That is that the only way you can find out whether someone really understands what it is you're talking about and what it is they don't understand is to give the talk to people, to an audience, and get their feedback. And so in the process of having a workshop or a class, we organize feedback sessions, and these are all in person, but we also do so in online classes and workshops. We have little breakout rooms. So we don't just have people tell each other, oh, that was good or bad, because oftentimes that's not really very useful. Instead, we supply them with a feedback rubric, which we've developed over the years, that allow people to give and to receive good feedback that helps them to improve their talks, which leads me to the next point, which is iteration. Iteration, almost anything that we do has some sort of a cycle of iteration associated with it. Create, you get frustrated, you give up. And giving up's always a good thing in my book, in iteration, because that means you're going to have a new idea. And then you revise what you did before, and then you get feedback. and then you revise and you deliver. And when we run these workshops or classes, we really try to give people an audience outside of the class. So you can see here's pictures of people presenting to an audience in the public or some other group. And then we have people give them feedback and we revise some more and we deliver, etc. And after a while, people get extremely comfortable with giving presentations, with taking in feedback, and with revising things accordingly. And these are skills that obviously don't just relate to the talk they're working on. They relate to all the things that Adam's going to talk about, but anything they're going to do in the world of communication. Now, what I'd like to leave you with before I pass things over to Adam is a talk that was developed using our method. This talk is by Dr. Xingyu Peng. She is a chemist at Dow. And when I start it, what you're going to hear, hopefully, is you're going to hear her voice. But you're not going to see her. What you're going to see are her icons and populating the squares of the storyboard as she talks. So you can identify where she is in her talk, where on the template she is. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work.
Morning, everyone. My name is Xingyu Peng. I'm a fifth-year PhD student in chemical engineering. Today, I'm going to talk about storing solar energy with chemistry. People in the world need energy, and all the energy we need in a year is delivered to the Earth by the sun in 1 hour. So take a guess, what percent of our electricity today is generated from solar energy? 40? 20? 10? The answer is none of the above. It's only 1%. Why we don't take advantage of this abundant renewable resource? Because there are many challenges of using solar. First, the sun only shines during the day, so we need to store a lot of energy for the night. Second, the sun shines more at deserts than cities like Madison, so we need to store and transport the energy from one place to another. Well, you may say, we can use batteries, but they are too expensive and heavy to transport. So our question is, can we find a new way to store energy that is cheaper and lighter? As a chemical engineer, I'm working on storing solar energy in chemical bonds. We are looking for a special type of molecules. When they are exposed to sunlight, their chemical bonds are broken by absorbing energy from the sun. We can then store and transport these separate parts. When we need energy, we just let the parts go back together. When the chemical bonds are reformed, the energy is released. This reversible process can happen over and over again. Sounds great, right? But here is the complication. There are millions of chemicals that are possible to use for storage. How can we know which one is the best? So we can use computer to help us. During my PhD, I developed a computational program to screen out the best candidates from a large chemical database. For any given chemical, our tool can tell us whether this bond breaking is reversible, how strong the bond is, and most importantly, what's the storage cost. Using this screening tool, we have successfully discovered several promising chemicals that can store 5 times more energy than the same weight battery, and at a lower price. Imagine one day in the future, all gas stations are replaced by solar stations. Instead of gas, our cars are now run on these special chemicals that harvest solar energy and do not emit CO2. On that day, we are living in a truly sustainable world. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing and Adam can begin to share.
Okay, so now that you've seen all of that, how story is used to do a talk, let's see how story is used to do visuals. And so I'll go right off of Xingyu's stuff here. So I just went to the internet this morning and just grabbed 3 infographics, and infographics are great and they're wonderful and they can give you lots of information in a condensed form. But people tend to, they find them interesting, but they tend to get lost in these things because it's an overwhelming amount of information and there's no story to hold it all together. And so, yes, this is interesting. Yes, that's interesting, but how do they relate to each other isn't always applied in these. And so what we've done in this course and what Holly and I have done together is taken infographics and changed them into story graphics. And so using the template, we simply have the setup, as Holly talked about, that leads to the question. And then we have the delivery that leads to the answer in a better world. And to do a story graphic, what we do is we pull those 2 parts apart. And so the beginning part of the story graphic is the setup, and then the ending part is the delivery. And so those 2 parts go together in an infographic type of manner, but with the implied story in there to get people to pay attention from start to finish. So if we take that same thing and we look at Sing Yu's and how she did her infographic or story graphic, here's her setup that leads to the question. You heard her talk about there's more solar energy shining in deserts as opposed to areas like Madison. And so that's what she's trying to show up here in the top. And then how she tries to use some sort of chemistry that can have its bonds broken and then transported from one area to another to release that energy. And then from that, so from these icons that she came up with, she developed this part of her story graphic, which is the setup. So storing solar energy with chemistry, there's more in the desert, there's less in Madison, we need to get it from here to there. Can we do this? And then how do we do this chemically, where the sun shines on the bond and breaks it, and then we transport the 2 different pieces, let them go back together, which releases the energy. And so can we actually make this happen was her question. And I clicked out. Let me click back in. So then the delivery on this is, what does she do to solve the problem that she set up? So here she set up that problem with the question. And then the whole second half of this is the delivery of how she actually goes after that problem. And for her, it was she has many. She uses computation to find out which ones are reversible and which ones are cost effective so that she can come up with an answer. And so for her story graphic, the second part of her story graphic is which chemical should be used for storage. Here's our inputs through her programming. Here's her, and then these are the reversible ones. And then down here is the output that she came up with. And so here's her entire story graphic. And the beauty of this thing is, what you're not realizing probably is that it's following this template that Holly was talking about. Here's her current world. Here's her, the main character. Here's the problem that she's got set up. Here's the question she's asking about that problem. And then here's what she's going to do to address that problem. Here's the main question of the whole thing that she wants to lead the answer to. Here's step 1, step 2, step 3, and then the better world down here in the corner. Exactly what came off of the template, but all visually represented in a story graphic. And so I'll show you some other ones from some other students. So this student wanted to create a way, or a pair of glasses that can let you see, physically see, ultraviolet and infrared radiation by putting on these glasses. Here's another one where if you want to study blindness in humans, we currently use mice, and we probably shouldn't, because humans see during the day and mice see during the night. And so a better animal to use would be these 13-line ground squirrels. Here's another one on protein trafficking in cells. So how do researchers figure out what proteins need to stay in a cell and what proteins need to be exited from a cell? And then here's how she takes that problem and gives the answer to that problem. And then in this last one, we see things by looking at them and our brain reconstructs them. So can we make computers that do that same thing? Can we have computer models that look at things and reconstruct them like our brain reconstructs them? There's another one that's in a final form that I wanted to show you up close, because often you start off with these projects in your research or your your career and you don't have a lot of data, right? There's a lot of data that exists in the world and you can use that to put together your story graphic, but you don't have any of your own personal data yet. And so Odalis here was a new grad student. And so she set up her story graphic to find collaborators and people to work with her. And so she talks about glaucoma and sets up the whole problem with the blocked drainage in people's eyes. And then what her lab already knows about the proteins and what they're going to go after, and then where she's going to actually enter this picture and start doing her work. And so she would use this as her poster to go to a symposium and talk to people about her project because she doesn't have any data yet. Back to Sing-Yu's. Sing-Yu's is not really based, I mean, everything in this thing is based on the pre-existing data, but she's only really showing you one piece of data down here in the corner. And more importantly, this can be used on a formal poster or a formal presentation as a way to talk to anybody in the audience. Any person, whether it's in the general public or a peer or a collaborator or anybody can come up and talk to Sing-Yu about what her problem is that she's going after and how she's trying to solve that, and then actually see the major part of that data. But then if you want to go into more detail, it's right there off to the sides, either the left or the right. So again, you might want to just stay here and only use this and talk to people, or you may want to expand upon that and give them more detailed information. You can also forget about story graphics for a minute, just go to any visual, right? All visuals should be built on a story. And so let's look at individual visualizations of data and apply the story to those. And so often in science, that's where Holly and I do a lot of our work, people will show you the beginning and then they'll show you the end. And they'll say, well, I set this whole thing up, here's where I started. And then when I ended, here's what I saw. And that's great, that's wonderful, but there's no story there. And people looking at these things love to see the story. And so if we can show the whole story, then let's show the whole story, right? What happened at 6 hours? What happened at 12 hours? What happened at 18 hours? And then give us the final result down here at the end. And again, you can see here's the current world. Here's what we're going to do to address the problem. We're going to try to see these things move through time. And then step 1 was 6, then 12 hours, then 18 hours. And then here's the final result that made a better world. Again, straight off the storyboard template. Often when you're trying to describe things and you're using a slide format, we do these process things where we're going to show you some sort of process. And so in this particular one, there's a dish of cells. And what researchers do is they say, I did this. And so then they put the next piece of data right there in the slide. And then they put the next piece of data right here in the slide. And then they say, wow, got a problem. I ran out of room. So what am I going to do? Well, I got all this room down here, so let's use that space. And then they end up down here and go, well, I still have more data to show these people. So what am I going to do? Well, I have all this blank space over here. Let's use that. The problem with showing a process this way is that people can go from left to right and top to bottom, but the minute you start to go in reverse like this, you start to lose your audience. They have a lot of trouble following you going backwards. And so you still have more information and more information. And so the first thing I want to show you, not about story, but about how to fix this fitting everything into a slide, is to simply use the letter S on its side. So if you turn your head sideways, you can see it's a big letter S. And what that does is it fits the space to allow you to show these processes happening over time and what you're trying to do to attack the problem to get an answer. And again, you can use this vertically or you can use it horizontally. And then again, back to the storyboard, right? Here's our current world. We're going to start with these slides or these cells, and they're going to be our main character. And then we're going to ask a question, what's going to happen to them as we do this experiment? And then we're going to show you the various steps of the experiment play out. And then we're going to get an answer in the end. Again, process is story. Let that unfold on screen. Here's another visual. Often people will have a new discovery or new something, and then they want to tell people about this, and they end up writing 6 pages of text about it, and someone has to go read all that text. I would argue text is great, but a visual will do this very quick and very effective. And so if you want to tell someone what this might do or what this discovery might become, then tell them a story of the future. And so we envision this going to third world countries or actually anywhere in the world. You'll be able to load any type of sample you want onto this and then incubate it and then read it with your phone and figure out what type of bacteria was in the sample so you know what type of antibiotic to give to the patient. And again, none of this exists. The only thing that exists is this new discovery. But this is where we predict it's going to go. And this is where I need collaborators in the medical field, manufacturing, electronics, apps, development, all those people I need to talk to get on board to help me figure out what to do with this thing. And I can do that visually really quickly. And again, current world, it's going to be the main character. I'm going to ask questions about that. What can we do with this? And then show you those steps and lead you to a better world. Again, using that storyboard template. And then the last example I want to show you is just using color. So often you already have something all laid out and it's beautiful in the layout, but what you end up doing is saying, well, I have to add color to this. And so then the joke that we use is we vomit color all over the illustration with no rhyme or reason just to have color. And again, if we just think about that storyboard template and try to apply a story to this visual, we can use color to guide the viewer through there. And so here's that same thing with color being used to guide the viewer. And so there's something happening here in yellow, and then there's something happening in red, or I mean blue, apologize. And then that leads off to something happening here. And then we switch over to red, which starts out dim and then gets really bright. And that leads the viewer through the story. Again, the current world is our main character. We're going to ask some sort of question of what happens. The first step is in light blue. The second step is in gray and what happens in the nucleus. And then how do we react to that, or how do we answer that? And then what we use to control that in the world, right off the storyboard template. Often when we're collecting data, we develop all kinds of histograms, and we need that. We need to see what the errors are. We need to see all of that data, and we need to label that and then use that to develop our stories. But showing something like this to an audience is very difficult for that audience to understand. So I'm going to tell you the story I want you to understand while you're looking at this, not processed into a story. And so here's the story that you need to get from this. So there's 2 drugs, that's easy enough to understand. One you take twice a day, and it's never effective. It never reaches the high level in your body that your body needs. And so you go through the whole day not in the right space, in the right mind from the drug. The other drug you take before you go to bed, and during the night it slowly releases, and during the day it's at a level where you can then use it in your body to combat the disease. So could you figure that out from that story? Yes, but it was very difficult. So if I process this data using the Storyform template and then show you that same visual, I can now tell you this story much easier, right? There's 2 drugs that we're looking at. One, we take it twice a day, never reaches the effective dose, and so it doesn't help you treat the disease. The other one you take before bed, during the night, it slow release. And so by morning when you wake up, it's at the effective dose. And throughout the day, it helps you combat that disease. So again, on the right is the same data, but told in a story form, right? You can notice that this really helps you out across the bottom, knowing what's night, what's day, twice a day, before bed, during the night, all of that stuff is shown in the story visually. So it's back to that show, don't tell that Holly was talking about. And then the last thing that we do in the course is we let you do a 10-minute talk to a peer audience. And so you can see I've assigned each slide in your 10-minute talk to a storyboard square. And notice that the conclusion is X'd out, because when you give your presentation using a storyboard template, you no longer need to tell the audience your conclusion. Conclusions were invented, a conclusion slide was invented because the audience wasn't paying attention to you the whole time. And you had to wake them up at the end and say, hey, remember me? I'm talking to you. I need to remind you of everything I talked to in my talk. But when you use a story form and you tell them a story, they know the answer when they get to the end of it because they're predicting that answer with you as you give them each piece of evidence. And then when they get to the end, they know what your answer is and they know how it fits into the better world. So we no longer use conclusion slides. So I wanted to show you just a couple images from some of the students' 10-minute talks. So here's their opening slides. You can see they're very visually rich. And students don't use bullet points and they don't use text on their slides. They show people information. They don't tell them information, right? All of the information comes out of the speaker telling the story. The visuals on the slides are just there to back up what the story is about. And so, yes, they do stop on slide 4 and ask the audience the question, right? How do I learn about the inside of stars? Do specific cells give rise to cancer? Do females and males respond to different disease cues? We make them stop and ask the question to the audience. And then the next slide in their steps is them answering that question a piece at a time so the audience can find out that answer. As Holly talked about with iteration and feedback, we set up different places for our students to go give these talks. So it might be in a coffee house, or at the corn maze, or at a brew pub, or at a science festival, or wherever it is. We make them practice this stuff over and over again and then get feedback from those audiences. And so what comes out of that feedback and iteration? Well, here's an introductory poster that one of the students brought to class. And this is what they had been using for symposium and things like that. And what you see is it's not easy to deliver. This is a very difficult poster to deliver because you spend all your time in this table or on these 6 graphs that look identical. And so learning about telling a story and learning about how to use visuals properly converts this poster into something that's more visually focused. So now you know who the speaker is, you can understand the title, you get some visual clues on what's going to happen, and then all of this table and all of these graphs now are situated in a very visual show, don't tell kind of situation. And then students who start with something that's very visually focused, like this particular poster, actually move over into a real story graphic. So here's Alex's, right? You can understand that title very easily. You can see Alex, you know who he is, you know exactly what he did as a setup and what problem he's going to attack, and then how he attacked that problem and what his conclusion is, all in one story graphic. So if you want these pieces, I mean, we can come give you workshops, we can give you classes, we can do that kind of stuff. But if you go to storyformscience.com, you can get the template, you can get the icon sheet, you can get the feedback rubric. They're all there for you to download. And then I'll just end with this. So here's the summary of the whole thing. When we ask for feedback from students on workshops and in classes that we give, they tell us that this stuff is transformative to them, right? That they now do their posters, their talks, and their even some of their research very easily with greater effectiveness. They've stopped using 40 hours of time to do this and now do it in a few hours. We've also had many people who have English as a second language come back to us and say, oh my, you just don't understand how easy it is for me to now give a presentation because I'm now not telling the audience what's going on. I'm showing the audience what's going on. So my story is much simpler because now the audience is viewing that story. As Holly told you, we teach you how to give feedback and how to receive feedback. And often participants in these workshops or classes are like, wow, I can't do that. And then just very quickly, because we guide them on how to do that in a safe manner, they understand that how powerful that is, and they start to learn to do it very fast. They find it much easier to talk to collaborators, right? Of course, because they're not talking in jargon anymore. And then many of these people go on to give job talks or symposium talks, write grants and papers, and come back to us and say, oh, it was so much easier to do that stuff. And this one kind of threw us aside when we heard this over and over again. So students would come back to us and say, when I'm doing that stuff at the bench or when I'm doing actual data, I now understand how it fits into the bigger picture so much better. I understand why I'm in the lab and what I'm doing in the lab because I understand story now. And it's not that big of a time commitment, right? You can do a 4-week course or a 6-week course or an 8-week course, and it's just 3 hours a week. So it's pretty quick, right? And of course, workshops are 1 hour or 3 hours. We teach you a lot less in a 1 hour or a 3 hour workshop. But again, if you want to see any of that stuff, if you want to see everything's at storyformscience.com, you can go look at it there. And so with that, I'll end, and Holly and I will be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very, very much, Adam. And
You're welcome.
Holly, I think Howard Schweitzer has a question. Go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, hi, Adam and Holly, thanks. That was great. I was just wondering, Adam, did you storyboarding?
Storyboard. Yes, Holly and I have worked on that over and over again. And you notice if you probably weren't paying attention to it, but as the whole front end of her talk is all following a storyboard template. So she was asking you a question, giving you valuable pieces of witness information, clues, so that you could answer that by the time she got done. And then I tried to do the same thing. So.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or comments?
I just want to say, I certainly hope we work out an opportunity to take this workshop. I would step up and want to do that. It's a lot to absorb in an hour, and it's really clear it is enormously valuable, and that practice and feedback. I realize how challenged we are to implement this in the breakout sessions with so little, without practice. We will certainly do our best, and it would be incredibly valuable to have a deeper understanding and practice of it. So thank you so much. I think that was very helpful to us.
You're welcome. Just so as an antidote to that, Holly and I get invited to symposiums all the time, and we talk in the beginning and do a workshop in the beginning. And then people during the symposium are scrambling to change their talks and change their posters before they present them. So,
Sue Peters, you want to unmute and
Oh, am I muted?
no, you're good. Go for it. Your video is off, but we can hear
Okay.
you.
I think I'm unmuted, right?
No, you're good. We can hear you.
Okay.
You're just, yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Your video is off.
Okay. Oh, my video. Let me put my video on. Okay. Thank you very much. It was really interesting to think about this, because more and more monetary reformers need to be giving talks to people. And this is a really good skill. I've given a lot of talks. I've made a lot of slide presentations. I agree with everything you said. But the one thing I want to stress about giving talks about money, and this was taught me around 10 years ago by a woman who I had very high respect for. And I went to her, and I had discovered the secret about money being created by the banks. And what she said to me was this. She didn't know about it either. She knew about a lot of other things. And she wasn't taken back by it, but she said to me, people in the United States do not have any validation in their experience for this concept of money. There's nothing to validate your words to them. And she said, she literally said, you have to repeat it to the people 15,000 times, because of course, monetary reformers in our organization know that it was taken out of the education system in the 1890s. So that's my stressing to people who are going to create presentations to their friends and neighbors.
Do you have a response, Holly?
No, I agree. I mean, a playwright, you need to say things at least 3 times. So yeah, I think circling around to the same thing, but you know, if you structure things as a story really does sort of take care of that. It's sort of in the whole, it's in the works. So, but I think it's a good thing to remember.
Well, I want to thank you, Holly and Adam, very much. I would echo the what Virginia said, and she also gave a great segue both to a poll I'm about to launch, which will capture any of your interest in doing a follow-up workshop. And so we would just ask that, you know, there's an option in the responses for everybody. So if you can take a minute to do it, we'd appreciate it. And secondly, that after a brief break back at 3:30, we're coming together for the design was 3 different concurrent workshops that might be informed by Storyform science, what we heard in this last hour, or, you know, the truth will probably be, we'll hear what, or you will witness what has not yet learned from Storyform science, and it has a long way to go. But that doesn't mean it wasn't worked on, and our efforts to do what they were talking about, implement it, are works in progress. And one workshop will focus on using what we learned in social media, one on talking to elected leaders, actually with a role play as part of it. And then the last, taking, as they really demonstrated, scientific papers, more academic papers, and translating them into a 3-minute talk or infographic. So I'm sorry we don't have the time, but for more questions, but I'm going to launch this poll and would ask all of you to take a few minutes to do it before you take a break. Thank you very much.